Rick Allmendinger. Oh, man.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
So glad you can be with us, Rick.
Well, thank you for the invitation and allowing me to crash your group again.
Please, I mean, it's a lot of things happening. It's really interesting.
Yep, it sure is.
With the background you bring, we just can't resist.
There it is.
Matt, how you feeling?
Much better, thank you. I had COVID and I have mostly recovered at this point. Thanks.
Great.
That's what we want to hear.
Just a tiny point. Peter, would you mind just rotating your laptop or something just a little bit, because there's a bright light right behind your head. And
Okay.
move it. It's
Just
like,
Peter talking.
Yeah.
oh yeah, wait.
There.
Oh,
Here we are.
Great.
Okay.
Yay.
Here we are. Yes. Now.
Gosh, you
Hey,
got
Rick.
those
There.
earphones. That's advanced technology.
Yeah. Well, my sons are studying, so I have to keep it quiet here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how is everybody? I'm really anxious to hear what everybody has to say, especially Ira. We feel honored to have you, sir.
Is he on yet?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
he's there.
But
He's
it's
right
so
there.
weird hearing I would say that.
There he is.
It's great
Oh,
for me to be
cool.
here with you all.
Good,
I'm
good,
just
good.
really excited about this cell of activism within your class.
A cell, we're a cell now.
We're-
Oh, I love it.
Right.
Sounds
A
very
sleeper cell, right?
conspiracy oriented.
In the 70s, we would have called ourselves troublemakers, right?
Right, yeah.
Right.
So, Peter, no more snow in Quebec?
No, there's a lot of snow here. I spent
Oh.
2.5 hours today cutting out. It's like a wedding cake, cutting down through about 5 feet of ice and snow
Oh, wow.
Oh,
on
my.
about 1/3 of the mountain in the front yard. So it's been a very long winter.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, but
Peter, where in Quebec are you?
just outside of Quebec City, slightly to the west. Yeah. And for those of you who understand statistics, there is global warming going on. That's the sort of mean. The mean is going up, but what we call the coefficient of variation or the standard deviation is really going wild. And so this is what we call anthropogenic, climate disruption.
Disruption
And
is right.
that is really the story here. We've never had a winter this long in decades, and so it's being disrupted and very unpredictable. Which,
Wow.
yeah. So that's that's a case in point for what we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, we're already 9 on the call, so I wonder who are we missing?
Well, we know that Carl, who said he would be here, is not going to make it, and also John Whitlock just sent a message that he can't. He had something come up and he can't make it.
Okay.
But that would have been, we've got. Let's see.
Dave
Jim
Whittlesey.
Hunter is going to be. I guess we maybe there's maybe one more person I'm expecting. I can't.
Dave Whittlesey. That's
Whittlesey.
another-
Dave Whittlesey says he
Yeah.
plans to be here. Yes.
Good.
So, but he isn't yet. So.
For the benefit of Rick and Ira, should we do some very quick introductions just to make sure that, they know who we all are?
Sure. Well, I don't think I need to say any more than, I'm Conrad and been doing this for a long time. So,
Whit Beals.
Go
Whit
ahead.
Beals, I majored in economics in college and then went on to what was then the Yale School of Forestry, got a master's degree and a Master of Forest Science. And I spent my career mostly in doing land protection projects for nonprofit organizations. I retired 2.5 years ago. Still involved in the environmental field for helping other nonprofits.
Great. Well,
speak up. Joe Simons, Joe Dwight.
Joe Simons here. I'm actually, I guess, at some level. The guy who started this whole thing off in 2013, I gave a presentation at my 50th reunion at Exeter. And the presentation was on climate disruption and what is this school doing about it? It got a whole bunch of class of 63 people very engaged, but we created a semi-organization called the Environmental Stewardship Initiative. But the castle walls were too thick and we were unable to beat them down. And so that kind of folded, except for the fact that Nat Butler had attended the presentation I gave. And he's 64, and so he got Conrad involved, and within a year or two, everybody else has dropped off, so it was just Conrad and me, sort of, I don't know, last of the Mohicans. And then I think starting last summer, class of 64 got more energized into this, and so we've been meeting, I don't know, September on,
Oh, yeah.
really trying to
Late September, we started to coalesce.
yeah. So meanwhile, I live out in the Pacific Northwest on a small island off the coast of Washington State, and just done a variety of things in my life that probably don't qualify compared to all the rest of you who are very, very talented folks.
Oh, come on. Don't be so modest. You're great.
Who's
Well, I'm Peter Calkins, and the thing that changed my life was, of course, the Vietnam War, because instead of wanting to go to fight, I joined the Peace Corps and went to Nepal. And there's huge problems of deforestation, landslides, annual loss of life, you know, flooding and so on in that country. So I went on to become an agricultural economist in the developing countries, and in 42 countries saw all the extremes of environmental problems, huge deforestation in Cote d'Ivoire in Africa, for example, and the encroachment of the desert. So I really feel that any problem has to always have an environmental effect. You can't solve a problem unless you bring in what are going to be the impacts, hopefully positive, of a project on the environment. So I've been a professor of economic development for my career.
Yeah, I'll follow on that. I'm Jonathan Coles, and I come from the developing world also because I grew up in Venezuela. In my connection, and I think I'm the one that knows the least about environmental things, particularly, and my connection is mainly through agriculture, because I was first an agribusinessman, probably the biggest investor in agriculture in Venezuela for through the 80s and 90s, and then became Secretary of Agriculture in Venezuela. And so I saw the public policy side of it. So I've been learning an awful lot, and I've found it extremely, extremely enlightening to belong to this group.
Well, I'm Joe Duane here in Bangkok. I have my career has been in law in corporate IT, mostly in Asia. Nothing to do with environment really, although I took trips in 1998 to Tibet and witnessed the PLA. They were doing massive deforestation of the great forests of eastern Tibet, followed by massive floods that summer that finally sparked an awareness in the PRC of what they were doing. Since then, I've retired to Bangkok. I was one of the, I guess, original coalescers of this group back in September, and have gone on to be a troublemaker. I take that back to my experiences in college during the Vietnam War, when I was very involved with the anti-war movement, and particularly doing teach-ins where we gave public education to groups in the Boston area. And we had to educate ourselves as the Vietnam, because at Harvard there was no teaching of anything to do with Vietnamese history or whatever. So that experience is still with me, and I think applies very much to what we're looking at with the Exeter students today, and the youth movement around the world in terms of them responding to this impending catastrophe.
I'm not sure what the order of things here, and I apologize.
Hey,
for being
David.
a few minutes late. Hi. After a bumpy career at Exeter, the rest of my career has been pretty bumpy too. Bounced from the State Department to the International Organization for Migration, to working with Interpeace, a Swiss nonprofit working in post-conflict issues around the world. And at every turn, you run into when you run into pain and people being sort of under pressure, often it is linked directly to their environmental situation. For the last 15 years, I've been living in Maine, which is always my home leave address, and got very much involved working with the small farming movement in Maine. Developed a small nonprofit providing low interest loans to young farmers, funded entirely within the community. And my hands in the dirt in that process got me more and more involved both in food and climate in Maine. And that led me back to the PEA group, which I fell into by chance. And it's really been interesting, fun, and hopefully I can contribute something along the way. And there you go.
Great.
Nat?
Rick? Okay, I'm Nat Butler, and I have not had any work experience in climate disruption. I worked in the state government and healthcare in Massachusetts, where I live, and I'm happy to be a member of this group. And I just, from the Exeter angle, I'd like to point out that with the exception of Joe Simons, who was class of 1963, and Ira, who was class of 1967, and Rick Allmendinger, who was class of 71, and also a classmate of Bill Rawson, all of us are class of 1964.
Shall I say something?
Please.
Go right ahead.
So I'm Rick Allmendinger. I'm the interloper from the class of 71, and I guess Joe initially invited me to join this group after reading a short post in the alumni news notes about a talk I'd given on energy and climate change to my own class, which is having its had its 50th last year. I'm a recently retired professor of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences at Cornell University. I tend to be on the solid Earth side rather than on the climate science side, but I've taught courses in energy and climate change and things like that. And of course, you really can't talk about energy or talk about climate change without talking about energy and so on. So I thank you again, all of you, for allowing me in your midst. And I'm a strong supporter of environment or alumni activism. So.
And I'm Ira Helfand. I'm a class of 67. I'm a retired ER doc and internist and addiction medicine doctor. I, many years ago, started an organization called Physicians for Social Responsibility, which focuses on two issues, climate change and the prevention of nuclear war. And I myself have been primarily involved in the work on nuclear war prevention, but increasingly over the last 15 years or so on the connection between these two issues, as we've become increasingly aware of the fact that perhaps the greatest danger of climate change is its potential for increased conflict in coming years and decades, including the use of nuclear weapons. And on the other end, the understanding that the primary way that nuclear weapons are going to be catastrophic for the planet is through the abrupt climate disruption that their large-scale use will cause. And been working with some of Rick's colleagues, Alan Robach down at Rutgers and Brian Toon out at the University of Colorado, we've done really important um, landmark work on the climate disruption that will follow the use of nuclear weapons. I became a trustee 2 years ago. I still feel like I'm a little bit new in that role, in that we've only had one in-person meeting since I joined the trustees. The rest have been by Zoom, and it's been a little bit hard to, sort of feel integrated into that group, despite really good efforts on the part of the current trustees, and have been sort of in listening mode part, trying to learn the ropes. But I did send a letter to the trustees in January of last year after my second meeting, pointing out that I thought it was really important for the Academy to be addressing in a global way the issue of climate change and nuclear war prevention, as these issues are going to dominate the lives of today's students for decades to come, and that we needed to be preparing them not just in terms of teaching them the science of climate change, but also having them come to some understanding of the socio and political dimension and economic dimension that of the process we're going to have to go through to get to a sustainable future. And urging the trustees to address this with the same passion and the same sense of urgency that they have addressed the racial crisis in the United States, which I think has been really quite exemplary, the way the school has taken on the mission of being an anti-racist school, and urged the school to take on the same kind of pro-survival role for itself going forward, both in the way the institution itself behaves, but more importantly, in the way it trains its students for the future.
Conrad,
I
you're
guess,
on mute.
yeah.
Conrad, you're muted.
My phone's going to ring. We are now 1 week away from the first from the next Climate Action Day, which will be the first in-person Climate Action Day since 2019 that I attended, and then so that happens next Monday, and I wish I could remember the name of who they've chosen as a keynote speaker. I did talk to Andrew McTammany, but I've forgotten it. And then of most interest, and most of you know that we're also going to have after setting this meeting up on fairly short notice. I guess we got it finalized on Saturday. On Sunday, I got a reply from the students after I'd written to them several times saying that I was wondering about how if they'd had a meeting with Principal Rawson. They had, and they would like to have. They said they'd like to have a meeting with us tomorrow. So we're going to have another meeting of this same group plus all the students who can be part of it tomorrow. And I think what I'm most interested in hearing from them is the response that they got from Principal Rawson about the proposal that they had submitted for any number of initiatives to sort of make much more climate activism happen during the next upcoming academic year. So I don't know that there's no point in us talking about that proposal tonight because we can hear about it tomorrow night. But I thought it might be if Ira has any more comments in general about his sense of how the trustees, he individually, but the trustees can get involved in this in a way that's more meaningful than it has been in the past. Anything you have to say about helping us understand how the trustees work, I think would be a helpful place to start.
Yeah, I mean, I could say we had a fairly extended discussion at the last trustees meeting, which was a Zoom meeting in January about this issue, after getting a report from Andrew McTammany and Warren Biggins. And I think there was a strong feeling among most of the trustees that indeed this is an issue that we need to be addressing in a much more inclusive and energetic way than we have been in the past. There was also a sense that that we needed to be looking a lot at the details. What does that mean? So for example, there's a proposal that on the table that the academy build a large solar array on campus to meet much of its electrical need. And the question was raised by a couple of trustees. This sounds intriguing. We're probably in support of this, but is this the best way to meet our electrical need? Will we do better with a windmill? Will we do better with biomass and several other things we put on the table as well? And a request from the trustees that the academy come back to the trustees with some detailed information about the other alternatives. And I think this was these were good faith questions that were posed. This was not an attempt to delay building the solar array. It was an attempt to make sure this is a fairly expensive undertaking. Is this the best way to cut down on the academy's carbon footprint? And what are the educational opportunities that would arise from building this as well, versus the educational opportunities that might arise from other approaches? So I think that there's a real commitment. I think there's some of the trustees who don't quite share the sense of urgency about this, but my assessment, my guess from the comments people made was that most of them really do, as I think Principal Rawson does as well, which is important because he plays a quite large role, I think, in the life of the academy at this point, obviously. And so I came away from that meeting quite encouraged that we were on the right track, that we're going to get a good plan put in place. And we're due to review the whole question at the May meeting. And we'll see where things are at that point. I think that's probably as much as I know at this point about where things are with the trustees. This was really, in my time, the first full discussion about this issue. But I was encouraged by it.
Great.
So Ira, was there any talk among the trustees about the curriculum and addressing climate change, in a very upfront and center, direct, comprehensive program with all students?
There was, Joe. There was. I think that we probably spent more time talking about, excuse me, the things the academy needs to do to reduce its own carbon footprint. But there was substantial discussion. Andrew McTammany did make a presentation about the current state of curricular offerings on climate issues. I have the same kind of concern that it needs to be more than just the science. I'm not as troubled as I think perhaps you are about the way modules have been scattered throughout the curriculum. I think in some ways it's great that this is being integrated into every aspect of the school's life, that it's not just a single chunk of time talking about climate and then we go about our business. This is the same model that they've used in the anti-racism initiative, where an attempt has been made to introduce the importance of fighting racism into every aspect of the curriculum. So I'm kind of glad that there are all these little modules scattered throughout the curriculum and it's constantly being brought up. But I do think that the piece that's missing is sort of some place where it all comes together, where students are really taught. I mean, and also there's this delicate balance between education here, in getting people to think constructively and critically, and indoctrination.
Mhm.
And personally, I have to watch myself because I kind of incline towards the indoctrination end of the spectrum on this issue. And I realize that there's a tension between that and the role of an educational institution. But given the enormity of this crisis, we got to get people to understand it. And I think it's a time where one can afford to be neutral about whether this is a real problem and how urgent it is to address it. It didn't get too much beyond that kind of general discussion at this point, Joe. And part of the issue is that curriculum development in particular is the purview of faculty. When I was at Exeter, I don't know if you had the same experience, but I remember being told all the time that this is a faculty-run school, which was held up as a point of great strength of the academy, that the faculty played such a large role. I mean, the faculty doesn't make most decisions about the school. They can't. The trustees are the ones that are legally responsible. But the curriculum, aside from the broadest strokes, is not set by the trustees or even the principal for that matter. It is set by the faculty. And so part of the issue here is trying to get the faculty to really own this idea, because they're going to have to not only create a course this year, but they're going to have to live with it and teach it and improve on it over time. And that means having them, really invested with a sense of ownership that this is their thing. And I think we need to figure out how we do that, how we encourage the faculty to address this question without having them feel that we're trying to tell them what to do, which I'm pretty sure will provoke just the opposite reaction of the one that we're trying to get.
Yeah.
Even if they adopt the course, they're going to be adopting it with a sense that it's been shoved down their throat. And the other ones are going to have to be in the classroom every day teaching. So that isn't going to work. And I'm not sure how best to proceed in that regard. I do want to hear, I was on the call on March 16th, I think it was, when Andrew and Warren presented to a general audience. I would like to talk with them in more detail when I'm up there in May and find out, how this is progressing, and what grouping is going to be looking at the curriculum question in detail and how they're going to get students involved in it. Because I think that's a key way that we can get real buy-in to the kind of curriculum change that we need. If the students are asking for it too, frankly, they carry a lot more weight than we do on issues like this. It didn't used to be that way. When we were kids, nobody paid any attention to us, but they listen to the students, which is good. So I'll be very interested tomorrow night to hear what the students heard from Bill, what their reaction to that was,
Right.
and what their further plans are, and
Ira,
how we can
I
work
think,
with it.
to the degree that we can gently encourage the students to keep on speaking up about what they want, I think that is all to the good too. Would you agree?
Well, I would
absolutely.
go further and say that there's no danger in my mind of the students not speaking up about what they want. This group of students is remarkable. It's for what little bit I've seen.
But they also may be encouraged to have a bunch of old guys telling them to keep on speaking up too. That may make them feel a little bit more comfortable to.
Well, in fact, the way we reached the point that we're at now, particularly in terms of the students, was that when we came together in last fall, we wrote up this statement of purpose and communicated that to the academy, focusing on the curriculum. And we had one meeting with McTammany, and asked him to continue the dialogue with other interested faculty, and he replied to us that there was no interest in doing that. And so that was the end of that. And then we had a conversation with Rawson, where he spoke mostly about all the campus carbon reduction initiatives, and only said one thing about our curriculum proposal, which was that was not a course, that was a college major. And so we stopped that. We stopped pushing there as well, and we spoke to the students, and we asked them, tell us what they were involved in. They have a number of clubs. They have a number of different small initiatives. It was apparent they weren't getting much advice or guidance. And one of the things, after listening to them, we talked about this notion of having, a full study program of the entire range of issues, from science through all the other issues, throughout for a full year. And then they apparently talked about that themselves, and they came up with their own version of that, which they did present to Rawson, and he was apparently more favorably disposed to hear it from them than from us. So we're going to hear tomorrow what the status of that is. They're talking about, they call it a year theme, where they would have a series of presentations and discussions, lectures by faculty or by outside speakers, hopefully by students themselves, on various issues. So that's a start. And if they can, so we'll see tomorrow. We're still with it, and where that will lead.
I think one of the issues we've got to address is that what we have in that original statement of purpose about curriculum is really the students have gone beyond it. And most of us agree that that was a very preliminary goal at the time, having one course that addressed everything, because it had a very small impact. It was, knowing that we have, 14 people in one classroom, that wasn't really going to do it. And what we want to get everybody exposed and prepared. So I think the students have gone beyond that, but we haven't actually revised that part of our statement of purpose. So we're still kind of stuck on that point. It's something we really should address.
Well, actually, the notion is not one small Harkness table of 14 students. The intent is that this is different. This is required of all students. There would be many sections, and that's fundamental to it. All students. And it's not even original with us if we'd gone back, which I've done since, and looked at the presentations made in past years by McTammany and Biggins on this. 2 years ago, they said exactly the same thing. They said, there's the small modules, as good as they are, they don't cut it. They don't get an entire basis of climate literacy to all students. And they spelled out that we need not only science, we need a presentation of political, economic, sociological, ecological issues. They said this themselves 2 years ago. So they already know this.
And I think we all agree on that. Yeah,
okay.
I think what we haven't done is revise that language that is in there.
Well, maybe at this point, let's see what the students, tell us tomorrow evening, because if Rawson is already liking what the students have done, and we think we could maybe, add on to what the students are presenting, and the students' proposal is going forward positively, maybe that's the best way to, keep things moving in a, constructive direction at this point.
Can I jump in just to say two things? One, I'm concerned about the keep things moving because it's been stasis rather than movement. And picking up on Joe's concern that these things were said 2 years ago, and yet what has actually happened? So I think in some ways, what's more of a concern is not so much the substance of what everybody is talking about, but where's the beef? What's happening? What is actually being done to move this issue, these issues, this group of issues, to front and center rather than back burner?
Well, I share that sense of concern about, is this really moving forward or not? But I would say the last 2 years have been incredibly disruptive at the Academy because of the pandemic. I mean, everything has been turned upside down. And it's been, to my mind, absolutely extraordinary, the degree to which, education has been able to continue in any form, given the conditions that the faculty and the administration have had to work under. And at the same time, this increased awareness with the George Floyd murder of the need to address racism, that had to be dealt with as well. So there's been a really full plate. That's not a reason to accept not going forward now, but I think it may explain somewhat why things have not moved as quickly as we would have hoped. The other question that I had is this: I really was very excited by the proposal that the students put forward, to have this year of focus on climate issues.
Yep.
The question that Bill Rawson raised was, this is great, but what happens the next year? This is not just something that we need to reach this cadre of students who are here at this moment. We need to have this as an ongoing form of education part of our education for coming decades. And that may be, in some ways, the biggest challenge. Assuming that we go ahead with something like what the students have proposed for this coming year, how do we make sure that that does not just become a one-off for this coming academic year, but really gets built into the curriculum going forward? You said something, Joe, at one point you said that Andrew McTammany told you that the faculty wasn't interested, but I didn't quite get the context. What was it that they weren't interested in?
Well, I didn't, we had a 1-hour Zoom meeting with him. I don't know if that was recorded or not, but
I think it was.
okay, most of the group was here. And so we talked about all of this generally. And at the end, I asked him, well, what's your reaction? Are you excited about this? We would need faculty, for this to happen, there would need to be faculty support. Are there other faculty who are interested in this and want to move on this? And you, or are you excited about this? And he said, oh, yeah, yes. And then we said, well, we'll set up another Zoom and please bring a few more faculty so we can broaden this discussion. And he said, fine. And then we scheduled that. And I think it was within 24 hours of that, he suddenly canceled without explanation, just said, not able to make it. And then so we rescheduled it. And then my understanding is, I don't know if we got an email or he spoke to Conrad or something, but he just said there's no interest in continuing this. So if I'm not right, on my memory there, Conrad, can you?
It was something like that. And basically, he was looking for, he was going to poll some faculty members that he thought were most likely the ones who would be interested in this topic and to explore it. And I think he found that they were they didn't have any time to. It wasn't they weren't interested. It's that, it just wasn't something that was going to happen without some more guidance from somewhere else. It just his wanting to sort of tweak something getting started didn't result in any positive response from any single other faculty member who wanted to get together and meet or whatever it was. So he felt stymied.
So, I mean, to the extent that that sounds like the problem may be not so much that they weren't interested in the issues, they just didn't have the time and inclination to meet with a bunch of us, old guys. To the extent that there isn't adequate motivation to address the issue itself, that's something which the focus next year really could help to correct. We get a bunch of good speakers in and get a huge, which I expect we will, hugely enthusiastic response from students if the speakers are good. That may be the kind of thing that creates the understanding among faculty, if it's not already there, of the essential importance of integrating this more fully into the whole curriculum.
Well, part of this is a political process too. I mean, I think we should be honest about that. And even if we as a group of older alumni are not, people who are going to get the most attention, we can still bring it up. And if students are continuing to bring this up also, and the faculty are thinking, well, gee, we are kind of interested in this, but now that the students are really more interested in it, maybe we need to be paying more attention to this too, and so forth. And I mean, these things kind of can build. And I think that we have a role, but we also have a role in collaborating with other members of the Exeter community, generally faculty, students, staff, Principal Rawson, and so forth, to keep this going. I mean, I know it's slow. I know a lot of us feel a lot of frustration about that. It takes a long time. It's hard to see progress, but it's the steady drip, drip, drip that is going to keep this moving.
Maybe I could butt in here for just a second and give a perspective from a recently retired faculty member.
Right.
Cornell isn't the same as Exeter, but faculty are in many ways the same the world over. And I think there are two things to keep in mind when you consider what the faculty response might have been or not. And that is, first of all, as many of you know probably better than I do, institutional culture is one of the hardest things in the world to change. It changes more slowly than anything else. And how this affects this particular discussion is that throughout the 20th century, academic institutions mostly hired disciplinary experts to be the best within their specific disciplines. And one of the problems with the climate crisis and even energy and things like that is that it requires interdisciplinary approach to problem solving. And this is something that academic institutions all over the world are struggling with, is how do we promote interdisciplinary study and work and things like that to a institution whose culture is disciplinary excellence, which means focus rather than broad brush sorts of things. And I've sat on many tenure committees where we ask the question, well, this person, yeah, they're working on interdisciplinary problems, and that means they're not experts in anything, right? Or that's how many people describe this. And so I think probably the way I read what you've told us about the Exeter faculty is these are people who are really superb at teaching French or teaching chemistry or teaching PE or whatever it is. And they do not know how, nor do they have necessarily the reward structure in hand to to reach out, to become interdisciplinary, so that the French teacher understands that, well, actually, the French culture has a lot to say about certain energy sources and things like that, as an example, or the English teacher can go back and look at works from so and so, or the history teacher can tell us about Givon's paradox or whatever. And all of these things, that they don't know how to put these pieces together. And frankly, that's what's happening at all academic institutions, and Exeter, I think, is an example of that. So it is slow because cultural change is slow. Unfortunately, the climate change can't really wait for for the culture to catch up, and that's a problem we're all facing in all parts of society.
Rick, I think that's a really good point, and I wonder if the experience that Exeter's had in the past couple of years with diversity, equity, and inclusion, is possibly a good way into this situation, because certainly the diversity, equity, and inclusion effort has had to be across disciplines, and maybe that will make it a little bit easier than it might have been otherwise to do something similar with climate disruption. I don't know, but possibly that could be helpful.
Right. I think that's exactly right, Nat. I think that can and will be a model for how to create this kind of curriculum-wide, campus-wide, interdisciplinary approach to this problem. And as I said, I've been just really impressed by how well the Academy handled that innovation even in the middle of the pandemic. I mean, they have some really excellent people. Stephanie Bramlett, is just superb, and several other people involved in that effort. But I think that model, and I've tried to frame this in terms of this is just like the anti-racism problem. We need to address it the same way, with the same sense of urgency. And I think that is going to be the way that it moves forward.
Yeah.
I'm encouraged.
Good. Yeah, John.
I wanted to remind us that the chairman of the science department, who is, I think, a French Canadian, Albert Léger is his name. Yeah. He wrote a very nice piece in the bulletin, and I know that Rick Almendinger had interaction with him back quite a few years about these issues. He wrote a very good piece centered on bioethics, about the importance of connecting science to the humanities. And I just had a visit from the alumni office from Amy Faulkner, who just today connected us with Albert Léger, so we can ask him to apply that same idea to climate change and use that as a center of future efforts to connect with the rest of the faculty.
You're right. I do know Albert, and Albert is a geology PhD like I am. So, and he's visited me here in Ithaca. So I do know Albert better than many of the science faculty at Exeter.
Great.
Before we go further, Rick, you had said there were 2 points you wanted to make, and you made the one about institutional inertia, and I just didn't know if you got a chance to mention your other point.
Oh, well, thank you for following up. My second point was actually about interdisciplinary studies and how difficult they are to bring to fruition.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, just as an aside, when I graduated with my doctorate, Evergreen State College, it just opened. It was basically the second, think about the second full interdisciplinary college program in the country. And I think the first one was Hampshire College. You know, Hampshire, I mean, these schools are struggling, sadly. To me, this is the future, but there's an awful lot of institutional resistance, as you pointed out. So I don't know how it's going to fly at Exeter, but I would really love to see incentive systems put in so that faculty and the students could work together to really come up with something really innovative and effective.
Well, the question is, you know, with Ira here, you know, what is the most effective way for us as an alumni group, you know, to continue participating in this process? I go back, and I sent you the quotes from, you know, the original CAP reports from McTamaney and Biggins 2 years ago, saying when someone asked, you know, they said, oh, the best thing you can do as alumni is give us your feedback and get other alums involved and get other alums to give us your feedback. We want to know what you're passionate about. We want to know, you know, what we are, what goals of ours are inadequate. We need to be pushed by you, all that good talk. But that's not the, so we've tried to, you know, engage in this conversation, and you know, it's now by April that we're able to talk to you, who's someone who's receptive to hearing from us. And you say, you know, I'm delighted to hear that you're this active alumni, but I have to say I had this conversation that I did not ask for. But Bill Rawson asked to speak to me specifically, although he didn't know me and I had never contacted him or my name had never been on anything. But he wanted a telephone call with me about this issue. So we had this meeting. And I asked him why he wanted to talk to me. And he said, well, he heard I'd be a good person for him to talk to. And I started off by saying the same things that you said, and very sincerely, that you know, I didn't know him, but I was very impressed by what had transpired recently at the Academy in terms of the diversity and now the need blind, you know, admissions, financial side, and very, very impressed, and assumed that he had a lot to do with that, and was very, I thought that was in the time of COVID, and you know, very, very impressive. And so I said, but you know, we do have, you know, concerns about the climate crisis issue and how that's being addressed. And so please don't take this personally. And I started to tell him how, our group had come together and had tried to communicate this. And without response from the faculty or from him, we turned to the students. At which point, he finally interrupted and said, it's not for the alumni to be prescribing curriculum to the school. And I said, well, we're just talking to the students at this point. And I said, if the students can get involved and put their programs together, that I think that's great. They can learn how to research, how to organize a course, how to make presentations. And he said, don't tell me about the learning process. I said, okay. And then he said, these are his exact words, you act like a self-appointed NGO, as if something's wrong with an NGO, And he said that twice. I've got the notes here. And he said, we have 20,000 alumni, and frankly, you are not on the top of my priority list. You are not on my priority list. So I didn't know, I did not confront him. I let him say all these things. I just said, well, we're concerned that about the students and about their future, and we think that Exeter plays a role in their future, and Exeter can contribute to helping them develop the knowledge and skills that they're going to need to confront the greatest challenge of their life. So I don't know why I was not confrontational with him, but this is pretty strong stuff coming. And he said at one point I tried to be. My father had was a physician and became a teacher and was asked at his medical school to head up the curriculum committee, and he had he dealt with all these institutional and faculty issues. So I told him I understand that one person can't just wave a magic wand and make curriculum happen, and he said, this is not a faculty run school. And then he repeated it, this is not a faculty run school. So I'm sharing this with the rest of the group so we know on the one hand, we're hearing, oh, it's great for you alumni to be involved, and we want to hear from you. We want your ideas, and we appreciate. But on the other hand, there is, in some quarters, very determined resistance.
Well, Joe, look, thank you for telling us about your conversation with Bill Rawson. I think you probably will be not having another conversation with him in the near future. But I think maybe we should just take advantage of where we are today, especially when we hear from the students tomorrow about the positive reception that they have had with Bill Rawson, and just keep moving, things forward.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Exactly.
Yeah.
As a classmate of Bill Rawson's, I can attest to the fact that he's never been a warm and cuddly person.
Well, maybe he has to be a little bit more warm and cuddly as a principal than he did as an individual classmate, Rick. I mean, you know him personally better maybe than all the rest of us. But in any case, he's got to be more of a warm and fuzzy person in his current job. Part of his responsibility.
Diplomatic comes to mind.
Diplomatic, exactly.
One thing that I'd like to mention, because I think mostly for Ira's benefit, but I think also to find out from the rest of us whether we're still kind of thinking about this. I'm kind of a big picture guy, and when we were messing with ESI back 9 years ago, Environmental Stewardship Initiative, we were going to have a website, and it was going to be called ESI-Exeter, because the concept here was to create a template of really thoughtful climate education. Let's just leave it at that. And then export that to every other major boarding school in the country, but certainly in New England,
and then use that as a leverage or a first stage of the rocket to essentially convince the next level up, the Harvards and the Stanfords and the universities of whatever, to buy into that same template. So there could be an ESI Stanford, an ESI Harvard, an ESI Andover, whatever. Because basically Exeter is a leadership incubator. And of course, when you graduate from any of these top colleges and universities, you're not going to go flip burgers at McDonald's. You're going to go into some significant decision-making capacity, or typically you will. And so the idea was that the more we could get this concept distributed among the folks that are like, let's call them the 1%ers, we would have a much, hopefully, greater impact on actually getting something done. Because even curriculum, for example, is mostly talk. And I think it's really important. I'm not saying talk's wrong, but we got to throw the walk in here, or it's just air. And so I think having a vision of where do you want to go next, because this is, if it only stops at Exeter, what do you wave a very small flag, on the side of the parade or something. But if we want to see everybody in the parade. We want that parade to get really long. So I'm just throwing that out as at least my perspective of why I even got involved in this in the first place. I couldn't believe that Exeter wasn't doing anything. And then I certainly couldn't believe how resistant they were 9 years ago. I think the world has really changed since then. And so there's more and more of this, oh shit, where are we going kind of concept among everybody, not just academic elites, but the guy on the street. And if that street could be in France or it could be in Thailand. I mean, we have a global problem here, and I'd love to see some more leadership.
I think it's a really important point, Joe, and it was an explicit part of the conversation that we had within the trustees in January. This needs to be something not only that we do for Exeter and our students, but as a model, and to provide leadership to the rest of the secondary school community. I think that's part of the attraction as well. It's an opportunity for Exeter to demonstrate again how it can play a national and international role, not just in its own backyard.
Yeah, to me, this would be a real feather, or maybe a whole,
exactly,
more than a single feather in their hat, because they could really do something that would be a game changer, or at least it would be stepping into a new conceptual pedagogical environment. And I mean, I think to me that would be incredibly exciting. And from my point of view, the trustees are in fact the board, and they've hired an executive director, Rawson, who then deals with the faculty and the students. But basically the fundamental policy decisions are made by the trustees. And if the trustees say, we're going to go over here, then I think everybody else has to fall in line. I mean, because this is existential stuff. Just like, oh, let's have a course on cybersecurity because it's becoming a big deal all over the world. This is way bigger than that. So I'm really thrilled that you are on this call and that you have the chops and creds that you do. I was remembering Helen Caldecott and Physicians Social Responsibility from 50 years ago. And now I got to look you up because I didn't know you were part of that dream team of folks who were really trying to stop this nuclear insanity.
Yeah, Helen and I and one of the doc were the people that started Physicians for Social Responsibility in 1978. And it's been a source of pride and frustration both. I mean, we've kept at this for a long time, and we as we approach a possible nuclear war in Ukraine, there's also a sense of you know, nice for sticking with it, but you didn't get anything done yet. So it's also in terms of my ability to focus on the environmental and climate issue. Ukraine's been pretty distracting for the last 6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
And I fear it's going to be much worse in the next month. So, but strictly in terms of this issue, you know, I think we're in a pretty good place. We'll see what the students say tomorrow. I think that the basic position of the trustees and very importantly, Bill, I think Bill Rawson really gets this. It is supportive, and we'll see what the students take away from their meeting with Bill was, and then how we present this to the trustees and at the main meeting, which is just like 5 weeks away.
Mm-hmm. And then it's
another issue I'd like to mention, which about NGOs, which was, and so this is not curriculum, but this is related to the basic issue of helping students direct a life path. Is that the school brings outside organizations onto campus and what they call meetups, which are they're career opportunities basically for students. And if you look at who they're bringing on, they're bringing mostly actually financial institutions and entrepreneurial institutions. And even when they call it environmental, you'll see that it's environmental entrepreneur or financing. It's in the end, it's yeah, this is a catastrophe, but there's still money to be made, and you know, you can find a way to profit off of this. And so we wrote a letter to Ross, and one of the things we said was, oh, why don't you actually bring some nonprofit organizations, some NGOs, to present a you know, a life work path to students that is not focused on making money. And we got no response from that. But I would like the Board of Trustees to be aware of that and to think if you know, Exeter actually should be inviting you know, a wider spectrum of organizations to talk to the students about what, you know, their future life work may really involve. Yeah, John.
Joe, I recall it just the opposite. I think we got a very positive response, and that was going to be included, and that was a mistake. The way they had written the original.
Did he write? Did he send
I don't
that?
know whether it was the principal himself, but we got a response that was very positive to that suggestion.
Okay, then send that to me.
Okay.
But anyway, I'd like Ira and the rest of the Board of Trustees to, you know, consider that, be aware of that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's a big part of the proposal that the students have been presenting. The kinds of people that they want to bring on as speakers are not from the financial sector primarily.
Right.
But we'll see.
I was pleased to see in their proposal, one of the things they wanted is a series of presentations over the course of the whole year. I don't know what role the trustees could have in sort of endorsing that or helping to facilitate it, but I think that in itself would be a departure from the way things have been done, and I think it would be beneficial to you know, if it, at least as often as once a month there was something that was, you know, exposing them to something really outside the realm of what they normally see in their regular school day. So, and along that line, I'll tell you, I actually have a Zoom call set up for the 2nd of May with Richard Heinberg, who I've been talking to. I'm actually, he's a personal friend in a way. Do you all know who Richard Heinberg is? The author, he's the author of the latest book, Power. This it's one of the books that the students had talked about. So he's, you know, and one of the things I'm going to explore with him is the idea of being not the keynote speaker at next year's Climate Action Day, which is way at the end of the year and things, but to, you know, come earlier in the year and be able to spend more than just one day, but to interact with the students over a period of time. And I think we'll see if that's I think he's interested in that, and hope he can be the first of many who help to shake things up a little bit.
You know, Ira, when I went down to Yale, it was a very interesting time. It was the beginning of the environmental awareness beginning to take hold in the whole country. It's the fall of '68. And here was this really tiny graduate school. I think there were 100 of us students at the time. It was under-enrolled, if you can believe that, but that was the case back then. Nobody wanted to be a forester. But in 50 years' time, you know, the school has grown tremendously. But when I got there, there were a series of a group of really interesting research faculty members there. And they put together a year-long series of lectures called Issues in the Environmental Crisis. And there's some really terrific, you know, people who came and talked, not just the student body, but most of the faculty attended all these lectures. And it changed my career path, just, you know, learning about that. And it would seem to me that the same thing could happen, you know, at Exeter, and I'm delighted that the students are onto that concept. And much more recently, just in terms of climate change, I attended a series of talks given by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service personnel, biologists of one sort or another, ornithologists and marine biologists and so on and so forth. And it was just mind-opening. But, you know, to hear an ornithologist stand up there and tell this, you know, group of 80, maybe 100 people, most of us land trust types involved in saving, you know, critical properties in the state of Maine. And one I'll never forget, this ornithologist went up there and said, well, I've been studying a tern nesting colony that used to exist on this island off the coast of Maine. It's gone. It you know, 4 years after I started studying it or something like that, it disappeared. And the reason it disappeared was it could no longer source the food it needed to feed its chicks. And instead, these terns are going and catching butterfish, young butterfish. Well, a butterfish can't be eaten by a tern chick. And so then they started catching moths, which are fairly high in fat content, but not what they needed. They needed, you know, the special kind of, I think it was anchovy, you know, to get these tern chicks to thrive and to create the next generation of terns. And it wasn't happening. The tern colony picked up and moved. It had been there for hundreds of years. And to have that kind of a presentation to a group of young students, I think would have huge impact. I mean, this is real, you know, climate crisis, you know, out there happening now. And the fact that they can't, you know, you can't grow soft shell clams in Casco Bay anymore because it's too acidified. You have to go out there and spread crushed clam and oyster shells to get the pH, you know, down a little bit so that you know, these marine organisms can survive. It's extraordinary what's going on right in your very backyard at Exeter.
Maybe I should take the role of the meeting cop here and say, trying to respect everybody's time. It's after 8 o'clock, and we do have another meeting scheduled for tomorrow evening. So maybe we should wrap up the discussion for tonight.
Thank you, Ned.
Agree with that.
Okay, well, we can adjourn until tomorrow night.
But before we do, I want to thank everybody for this opportunity. It was great to have Ira here and to have some of these conversational pieces, like learning about terns, that, you know, very educational for me. Kind of depressing, but educational.
Oh, I think it's been a wonderful meeting. I really think it's been extremely illuminating.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed talking with everybody. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Well,
And looking
tomorrow
forward
night,
to continuing this with the students tomorrow.
will tomorrow night's meeting be recorded?
Oh, yes,
I
it'll be recorded tomorrow night for sure.
I won't be able to make it, so look forward to seeing it ex post facto.
Yep.
Good.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye. Thanks.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thank everybody.